Thank you, Joseph, for the introduction. And thank you to the British Acupuncture Council for inviting me here today. I feel very honoured to be here speaking about one of my very great passions, mentoring and supervision. I think there's never been a more pertinent time for us to really look at where we're at with this subject in our profession. I don't know how it's been for all of you, but looking back on my practice over the last 18 months, I'm not sure if I've ever had such a challenging time. So I really appreciate that the BIAC are really putting mentoring and supervision up front and centre this year and really focusing on how we can get it out there to practitioners and really encourage people to take part. I think the BIAC realised that it has been a really difficult year. I know that I've worked closely with lots of practitioners during this time who have left practice or not been able to continue for various reasons. And I think mentoring and supervision is one of the ways in which support can be offered to make practices more sustainable at the best of times. And this has not been the best of times. So during this brief talk, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what mentoring and supervision is. I think there's a bit of misunderstanding around that, about why I think it's an integral part of our practices. I'm also going to talk about why have it? Why is it important? And also where you can find it, a little bit about my own experiences, and then I'm going to introduce you to my lovely colleague Susie Bentley, who's going to talk a little bit about her experience of having mentoring and supervision starting within the pandemic. So what is mentoring and supervision? I wonder what all of your experiences here in the room have been today, whether you've had any, whether they were good or bad. I think that sometimes the word supervision can be a little bit misleading. I know before I ever had any, I thought it sounded a bit like someone keeping an eye on me, telling me what to do, someone who knew more than me. Well, these are not the things that mentoring and supervision are. For me, mentoring and supervision provide a safe and non-judgmental space in which we can explore the issues that arise in our practice. They are a deeply reflective space, and the mentor or supervisor that is there holding your session is not there because they know more than you. They're not there because they know all the answers. They are there because they've been trained to hold this space for you. And in holding that space, they allow what I see as a kind of alchemy to happen. As in many therapeutic settings, just having an opportunity to voice out loud what is happening for you allows something to happen, to allow your own ideas and processes and thoughts to be reflected back at you, and to allow an exploration of what's happening. And of course, your mentor will share their knowledge and wisdom, but they will also help you to access your own great store of knowledge and wisdom within those sessions. And it's an opportunity to share. Being an acupuncturist is a wonderful profession. For me, it's the best job in the world. But it can also be quite lonely, sometimes quite isolating. And things happen, great and wonderful things happen in our treatment room, and sometimes some really difficult things. And there's normally an audience of one for those. And of course, we explore and discuss them with our patients, but we don't then go home and talk to them with our family or our friends because they're confidential. And sometimes there's some really difficult things arising. So supervision provides an opportunity to explore those things and to celebrate the good things as well. It's very enabling and empowering to know that you have these regular sessions booked when difficulties arise in your practice. So as acupuncturists, we're interested in the movement of qi. And what I would really say about mentoring and supervision is, as well as reflecting back your own wisdom and knowing, deep knowing, it will also allow you to move the stuck chi within yourself and within your practice, to allow this movement that we're all looking for within our patients to also happen within us and within our practices. So why? Why would you have supervision? Why go out and find it? Well, I want to start by talking a little bit about the concept of the wellspring. We all know about the wellspring of Chinese medicine, but what about the wellspring within our own practices? Well, really, we as each individual are the wellspring. We set the chi for what happens within our practices. And for me, knowing that I am resourced as a practitioner and that I have support and that I am the best I can be as I walk into each session is as important as having my needles there. And this is where mentoring comes in. We don't just give acupuncture to our patients and listen to them. We deeply hold them in those moments that they're with us. So who is holding us in our processes, in our professional practice? This is where mentoring comes in. And I think that it's really important for us to offer to ourselves that holding and support that we are then offering to our patients. It's another complete circle. During the time that I was working with the BIAC a few years ago, I was really surprised and upset to see some statistics about what a high attrition rate we have as a profession. A lot of people don't continue practice after around the 3-year mark. Why is that? I think one of the reasons, I would postulate that one of the reasons is that there isn't enough support for a new practitioner out there. We're deeply supported when we're going through our professional training, and then we're let go out in the world, armed with our needles and some excellent training and information to get going. But what do we do when something goes wrong, or when we don't know what to do, or we're struggling to get patients in? How do we move forward? This is one of the places that acupuncturists really, I believe, need mentoring and supervision. In fact, in a lot of professions, it's considered mandatory, including, as for those of you out there who are registered with the RCHM will know, including for herbal medicine, it's now mandatory. It's not mandatory in our profession yet, but I would really exhort you not to wait until it is. So I want to talk a little bit more about why have supervision, what's it for, and what do you do in those sessions? Well, really it's there to explore those issues that arise in practice, and it doesn't matter how long you've been in practice. You might be a new graduate, you might have been practicing for 30, 40 years. I've had the honour of working personally with people from all across that scope. And interestingly, the similar issues arise throughout our practice. I think sometimes we can think that we're the only ones struggling with these issues, and sometimes some shame can arise and not wanting to speak to other people in case they think we've got it wrong. But I think interestingly these same issues arise. So what are those issues? Well, there's the standard issues of complex cases, really difficult, complex, different symptoms that don't necessarily fit into what we'd like them to in order for us to make our diagnoses. And we can certainly explore these within a mentoring setting. And there might be things we've not heard of before, or patients might not respond in the way that we would have anticipated them to. So this can all be brought into your session and explored. And it's so affirming and empowering to be able to bring that and go back to your next session with one of those patients, having a clearer idea about what you can try next, or where things might have gone wrong and how to move forward. And We may want to explore earlier on in practice setting up the business, the practicalities of it. How much are you going to charge? Where are you going to practice? How are you going to manage your relationships with your colleagues in the area? Are they colleagues or are they competitors? Interesting question. Are we going to charge cancellation fees? And when are we going to make exceptions to those cancellation fees? All of those things are really important to look at. Perhaps the hours that we're going to work and what is entailed within those hours as well. I think as practitioners, we can all be tempted just to think of the time we're working as when we're with our patients. But what about all the thinking and planning time, the admin time, the bookings, the telephone calls, the inquiries, the emails, ordering our supplies, cleaning our rooms, which is particularly pertinent since we reopened during the pandemic. I think there are some days where I wonder whether I'm perhaps more of a cleaner than an acupuncturist. And we can also look at our professional boundaries. This is an issue that has many, many layers to it. Just to share a bit of my own experience, I used to practice in London initially, and I found it really easy to hold my boundaries there. I was very unlikely to ever see my patients outside of the treatment room. But since I moved back up to my native Lancashire, where I now practice, I live in a city but a small one, and I've been here a long time. I've been practicing nearly 17 years here now, so I've treated a lot of people. I know a lot of people. Some of them then turn out to be my children's teachers or my doctor, or they might be my neighbours. How do we manage those multiple roles, and how do we keep them working for us? What do we do when we realise our boundaries have slipped, which they inevitably do sometimes? I think if we are getting tired or burnt out, it's very likely that we might not manage our boundaries as well as we might like. So how do we extricate ourselves from those difficulties within our professional relationships? How do we redraw the boundaries? And how do we balance our work and home life? For example, again, to share some of my own experience, I worked at home for years until the pandemic meant I had to make the difficult decision to leave with 2 different children at home and a husband working for the NHS. I just couldn't see how to make it work without going a bit mad. But in the early years when I worked here, I had 2 babies very close together, and they were being looked at after by babysitters in the other room, and I was rushing out in between patients to go breastfeed them. Patients could hear them crying, sometimes screaming all the way through the session. How do we manage it? How do we make it work for us and our patients? How do we manage issues arising with our own health or our family's health? These are just some of the examples of things we can explore. We've talked about what happens early on if you access supervision close to the beginning of your life as a practitioner. But there's also the other end. Is your own health or issues within your family meaning you need to start reducing your hours? Or are you even wanting to retire? How are you going to manage that ending? There's a role here for supervision in empowering you to manage these things and really explore them and really think deeply about where you want to go with these issues, what's going to work for you and your client group. So we're going to move on to talking about where we can access supervision and what the differences are between group supervision and one-to-one supervision. And I'm just going to share a little bit about some of my experiences as well, because a lot of practitioners don't access supervision, and I often wonder why that is. I know I've had quite a lot of conversations over the years, and lots of people think they're doing okay without it, they don't need it. I think for some, the cost is an issue as well. And going back to what we were saying earlier about investing in ourselves, I think it's really important to acknowledge that in investing in ourselves through having these regular sessions, we bring quite a bit of energy and the right structure to our practice. And so my experience and the experience I've had of working with colleagues is that that causes a shift to happen within your own practice. So if you're just entering practice, or you're setting up somewhere new, or you're finding that your practice isn't attracting as many patients as you would have hoped, financially it seems a bit counterintuitive to say, oh, I'm going to go and put further financial burdens on myself by paying for supervision. But actually, in so doing, you can be resourced in creating the right energy in your practice to attract more people in and to manage them. And that's how it so often works. So I would really exhort you not to rule it out on the grounds of cost. And there are actually some new ways of accessing more low-cost mentoring, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And so for those of you who think you don't need it, first of all, well done. You're obviously doing an amazing job in your practice. But I would really ask you to notice those times when you perhaps feel alone or unsure or exhausted or unsupported or fed up in your practice. And just really think about whether they might be times that entering into a mentoring relationship might be a useful tool for you. So what are the differences? We've got two main different kinds of supervision, one-to-one and group supervision. In one-to-one supervision, what we tend to do is commit when we enter into a relationship with our mentor to at least 5 sessions a year. For some people, it's more than that as well. But then there is a framework of knowing that those regular sessions will happen every couple of months, with perhaps a bit of a break over the summer when people are away on holiday. And when you're choosing a mentor to enter into one-to-one supervision with, I think it's really important to choose the one that's right for you. People are all trained in a very similar way that we can access as acupuncturists. But disciplines are obviously different, and that might be important to you. Are you a 5-element practitioner or a TCM? Do you want somebody who is of the same discipline? And just as in choosing an acupuncturist, you want someone you're compatible with, that you feel safe with and that you trust. So there's not as many supervisors as we'd like there to be within the country. And for me, that was a barrier for quite a long time. But actually, it is possible to work online or on the phone with a mentor. So if there isn't anyone near you, don't let that be a barrier. I used to feel that I couldn't do that, but especially during the pandemic, I found I've done it an awful lot. And I've built some relationships with practitioners I've never met. And it's actually worked really, really well. So if you do live in a place where there aren't many, don't let it be a barrier. And so obviously in the one-to-one supervision, the sessions tend to be about an hour, and you get the full attention of that mentor. And for you, that might feel like the best way. You've got more time to work through the material that you've got and the issues that you bring. And the more you invest in thinking about where the issues lie within your practice and within you, the more you'll get out of those sessions. And however brave you feel able to be and how much of an open heart you bring will also have a direct reflection on the quality of those sessions for you. I think we all have things that we feel a bit ashamed to talk about or worried that we'll be judged. And really those are exactly the things that you need to bring. And there is a framework for supervision that helps you to feel safe. There's a commitment on both sides to a safe and non-judgmental environment. What you speak about is confidential, and your supervisee will not be there rushing to tell you what to do and to fix things. They will try to enable you to find your own way forward and to work together. And if there has been an incident where a mistake has been made, which happens to us all at some time or other, your mentor is not there to judge you for that. They are there to support you deeply in what will be an incredibly challenging time for you to process what's happened and what you can do to protect yourself from happening it again and how you can put it right. So that's just a little bit about one-to-one supervision, but I also really want to talk about group supervision. A lot of practitioners, and myself included, think, oh, I couldn't do that, sit in a room with loads of different practitioners, it just doesn't sound safe. Well, the same rules apply as before. It's confidential. You can talk about your own work, but not everybody else's. Obviously, in the session, there may be less time for you to talk about what's going on for you. Although groups tend to meet in a similar minimum of 5 times a year, and they will be for longer than an hour, you obviously won't get an hour in which to work. But the really interesting thing about being in a group is I have found, and I've had it fed back to me as well, that I learn so much from other people's work as well, because we're all facing really similar issues. And also, if I bring an issue, not only do I get the support and the wisdom and knowing of my supervisor, but also the support and wisdom of knowing of every single one of those people in the room. And it's such a rich resource. It's amazing. I've been in a group now for 9 years with a group of incredible women who I feel so deeply grateful to. I remember my friend saying to me once that she felt that I grew as a person every time I came away from one of these sessions, and I think it's true. I live in the north of England, as I've already alluded to, and my group supervision sessions are in London, so I have to get the train, I got to put the crack of dawn, and I go down and I pay for my supervision, and I want you to know that it's worth every penny. To experience being so deeply held and supported by a group of colleagues, to have colleagues. I've been so used to working on my own, and to really have an opportunity to give myself the time to deeply explore what's happening within me and my practice has been so empowering and enabling for me. And I know that my practice has benefited and continues to benefit as a result. So don't rule out group supervision, rule it in and have a look into it. I want you to know that I do both, actually, because I get something different out of both of them. And a lot of supervisors, if you enter into supervision with them, be it one-to-one or in a group, they're also there for you. So there is a limit to what time they can offer, and that's something you contract with your supervisor. But if a crisis happens for you, then you can email or you can phone, and often they might have time to do a short session with you to support you in that moment. And this, I've had to utilise this a couple of times myself, and I cannot tell you how supportive it was. Perhaps that suicidal patient, usually the last one on a Friday, or something happening that you just don't know how to handle on your own. It's incredible to know that you've got someone there at the end of an email or a phone just to share and explore this with. So those are the two main different kinds, one-to-one and group. So I just want to talk a little bit about my own experience of supervision, just to share with you some of the huge differences it's made in my own practice. So I came to university, the University of Westminster down in London, to study acupuncture when I was 23. And I remember telling everyone that I was a mature student. But looking back, I wasn't. I was very young, really. I'd previously qualified as a massage therapist, and I was self-supporting financially to get through university. So I was very lucky to get a job through one of my colleagues on the course at a big cancer hospital in London as a massage therapist. And so I entered into that with no extra training or anything, just to go and support these patients with massage. And the job was on a hematological cancer ward, so it was patients with leukemia and lymphoma and multiple myeloma, very severe illnesses. And as it was an inpatient unit, the ones that I saw were severely unwell. And it was a very busy unit. And so there was a lot of active treatment going on. So there wasn't much pastoral care going on for these patients here. There wasn't much time for them to share their experiences. And as I would often be with them, massaging them, I found, as we practitioners do, that they shared a lot of their experience with me. So from diagnosis and this bomb going off in their lives and how they dealt with that, how they were able to find acceptance and try and get their heads around what they had to get through, try and get their head around the possibility of not making it. I often walked beside them through these journeys, then moving into their very active and difficult treatment, how unwell they felt, getting infections, often nearly losing their lives. And for some, I also ended up being with them as they died, massaging their feet and gently supporting them and their relatives. As a job, it was an enormous honour and I loved doing it, but I was very young to be unsupported doing such work, and I soon found it started to affect my health. I ended up with a nasty back injury, which at the time I told myself was from not being in the best position as I leant over doing massage on hospital beds with all sorts of IV drips. But I think the honest truth is it had more to do with being overwhelmed. And eventually someone suggested, after 2 years of me working there, that I might like some supervision. I didn't really know what it was, but I said yes because I knew I was desperate. And looking back now, I know I was really burnt out and not in a good place. So a lovely senior Macmillan nurse gave me my first session of supervision. And honestly, I think I cried all the way through it. But I came out feeling like I had been thrown a life raft and saved from drowning. I felt lighter, I felt supported, I really felt heard and met. And that was the beginning of my long association with mentoring. When I graduated from university, I immediately got a supervisor and joined a multidisciplinary group actually, which was a really interesting way of working, casting lots of different viewpoints on different patients, and it really, really helped. I'll share with you some of you may have read in an article I wrote for ACU a year or so ago that one of the very first patients I went to see as a newly qualified practitioner was a home visit for a very elderly lady who had neck problems. And after I'd got to the house and done the consultation, I really had wanted to treat her leaning forward on the table, supported by cushions. And she just was adamant she didn't want that. She wanted to sit in her Parkinol chair. And so we talked a lot about how I would be needling her neck, put cushions behind her lower back so that she was sitting forward a bit. I said, do you think, do you feel supported? You won't be able to move your neck back because the needles will be there. Yes, that's fine. So I put gallbladder 20 in, and what happened was she drove her neck back immediately, driving those needles right in up to the hilt. You can imagine my horror. I just thought I'd killed her. I stayed with her for quite a long time, tried to persuade her to see the doctor, but she wouldn't do it. I rang her daughter and explained what had happened. She seemed fine, there was no blood. I'd followed the insertion rules, thank goodness, about the angle of insertion. But the gripping horror, I mean, I honestly could have walked away and never done another session again. And for days afterwards, until I saw her again, every time the phone rang, I thought, that's it. That's them telling me that she's dead. But through being able to speak about it in supervision, I was able to forgive myself, very important, work out how I could stop this happening again, work out how to deal with it, and obviously put in place some stuff for myself and this patient to make sure that neither of us were ever in that situation again. But had I not had support at that point, I don't know what I would have done. It was awful. So I went on to continue with my mentoring until I left London and moved back up to the northwest, where there were no mentors at the time. So for quite a few years I managed on my own. it didn't even occur to me to ask one if I could do it over the phone. I really wish I had. And during this time, I got married, I had 2 babies. I went through a period of having one baby who just did not sleep. He didn't sleep. I went back to work when he was 3 weeks old, which just seems beyond madness to me at the time. But at the time, I didn't believe I had a choice, and had another baby very close to. Managed a really busy practice during all of this time, but soon realised I was in a bit of a mess. I was burnt out, I was exhausted. I didn't have much in the pot for myself. And so I decided to go and do the mentoring and supervision training with Isabel Cosgrove and Sally Blades. And it was a pivotal time in my life. I think my kids were 1 and 2 when I did it. And I learned an awful lot during the course of that training about myself, as well as how to be a mentor and supervisor. I had to walk the journey of really looking deeply at myself and my practice as well. And I want to share with you one of the most valuable things I learned there about how I resource myself as a practitioner. There's a little exercise that I learned on that course that I'd like to share with you now. I make myself do it very regularly. I share it with my patients and supervisees. It's simple, but it's very interesting. So it's 2 circles. They're both you. They're like a pie chart. The first one is how much energy you've got going out. So you might have work. Of course, that's not a one-way street. There might be energy coming in from that as well. But how much is it costing you energetically? There's managing your household, perhaps managing your health, worrying about the future, perhaps aging parents and dealing with them and supporting them. There might be concerns and worries financially. What is there in your energetic pot that's going out? And then what have you got going in? What's coming in to nourish you and support you? Perhaps there's your work, maybe you get a lot from it, the love of family and friends, being in nature, being out in your garden, doing classes, going to see therapists. How are you nurturing yourself? I want to share with you, with 2 young children, when I first started my supervision training, I think my energy going out, pie chart, I filled twice. And the energy coming in, I had this little wedge like this. And I soon realised in order to have a healthy practice, to be healthy in myself and have a healthy practice, I had to have at least as much energy coming in as I got going out. But of course, when we're under duress and times are difficult, those are the times when we often say, I don't have time for those nice things. And actually, we need them the most at that point. So among lots of other things, that was one of the really important things I learned when I did my supervision training. And as I said earlier, I remain in a group with those amazing women that I did the training with. And it has been one of the most supportive environments I've ever had in my professional life. And it really enables me to get through some of the massive ups and downs I've had within my practice, and to still be working and really, really, really enjoying my practice 18 years from qualifying. And I still need my one-to-one supervision as well as my group. And in fact, it's down to my one-to-one supervision that I'm here talking to you today. I was contacted by Joseph and asked if I'd do this talk, and I just freaked out because I've not done anything like this before. And back when I was working at that big cancer hospital in London as a young 23-year-old, I was asked to write a policy for the trust on complementary therapies, and also to invent a whole volunteers policy. And looking back, that was quite a big thing to do. Nobody helped me, and I just, perhaps with the arrogance of youth, sat down and wrote it all myself. It took about 6 months. And then I discovered that I had to present it to 3 boards in order to get it passed by the trust. And on these 3 boards, well, I can remember they were all men for a start who were much older than me. They were consultants and politicians and directors of the trust. And looking back, I think they really bullied me when I gave those presentations. They baited me and they bullied me, so that after the first one, I was ending up vomiting in the toilets before I went in to give those talks. They did actually pass my policy in the end, but not without giving me a lifelong fear of public speaking. And so when I was asked to do this, I thought, I really, really want to do that, but I know I need to address this fear. And so I contacted my lovely supervisor, Isabel Cosgrove, who really supported me in looking at where this fear came from and going back to that younger version of myself. And imagine in holding my hand during those sessions, that younger version of me. And she really encouraged me to think about what I would like to have said to those people who bullied me back then. Well, I started what I wanted to say, and it went on for quite some time. And let me tell you, there was a bit of right language in there as well. But I felt something freeing up inside of me, and it was with the support of my supervisor and that session that I was able to find my way to being able to come here and speak to you today. So they're just some small examples. There are many, many, many more of how I have been supported in my practice over the years by supervision and mentoring. And I'd really like to say, for me, it is essential. I just wouldn't want, I wouldn't want to be without it. Just as I wouldn't want to be without my needles. It is an integral part of how I practice. And it's really enabled me over the years to really refine and improve my practice. And I do want to let you all know that it does count as part of your CPD as well. So it's part of your hours, and the BIC really recognise it as part of how we grow as practitioners. So where can you get supervision? A lot of you will have seen the advert in the ACU, the Wild Beast Network. I think my name's on there as well, and lots of other incredible people. That's one of the ways. And like I say, that's broken down by area, and you will notice there are more in certain areas than in others. But don't let it be a barrier. As I said earlier, contact the practitioner and talk about whether they may be willing to do Zoom or telephone even, if it's too far for you to travel. Also, the British Acupuncture Council have a mentoring and supervision network. Because there's been so many changes within the BAC, that was on hold for a bit, but thanks to the really good work of the board, the current board and CEO, they're really working at bringing that back on, and you can find the details of that on the new BXC website. And then I just want to tell you really briefly, during lockdown, the Northern College of Acupuncture started something called the Practitioner Hub. And this is a service that allows you to access CPD. So you pay a monthly amount and you can access some wonderful online courses and online CPD, and you can pay a certain amount more, not that much actually, for what you get, and you also get online mentoring as part of that. And I was really honoured to be involved in starting the first group with the Practitioner Hub during lockdown, because the Northern College really recognised that practitioners needed support during that time. So I have been mentoring a wonderful group, and it's really worked well to work together. So that's one of the more low-cost options. And if cost is really an issue for you, or if you would like to explore that further, do have a look at the Practitioner Hub through the Northern College. Basically, the message is just do it. If you're not already doing it, go out there and find yourself some supervision. I promise you, you won't regret it. It is wonderful and essential. Thank you for indulging me in talking to you about this today. I really hope that soon we can be in a room together at the conference, perhaps next year. For those of you who know me, you'll know that I'm missing the opportunity to have a knees up at the Saturday night British Acupuncture Council party. But I hope you all enjoy the day and the rest of the talks. I want to introduce you now to a member of one of my supervision groups, the wonderful Susie Bentley, who's going to talk to you all about her experience of entering supervision during the pandemic. Thank you so much, everybody. Look after yourself. Bye-bye.